With Steve Nash and Dirk Nowitzki continuing to play and produce at a high level, Dallas felt they still had a window to compete for another title, but needed to freshen up some of the surrounding parts. Dallas traded longtime Mav Jerry Stackhouse and signed free agent and former Suns All-Star Shawn Marion. Then traded another longtime Mav Josh Howard for Caron Butler and more depth at the trade deadline. With the team more comfortable under Rick Carlisle, the Mavs started to look like a championship-level team again. Steve Nash was having an MVP-caliber season, averaging 15 points a game and 12 assists per game. Dirk Nowitzki continued to dominate as well. The Mavs finished the season 58-25, first in the West, but somehow seemed to fly under the radar as a title contender. The Mavs took care of business in the first two rounds, and they were back in the Western Conference Finals to take on the defending champion Los Angeles Lakers. Kobe Bryant would set the tone and lead the Lakers to a Game 1 win, but the Mavs answered back with an overall team effort to win Game 2. In LA, the Lakers came out and dominated in a Game 3 win, but the Mavs once again rose to the challenge and won Game 4 to tie the series. In Game 5, the Nash-Nowitzki duo were unstoppable, blowing out the Lakers with a Game 5 win. The Lakers were able to tie the series in a tight Game 6, but the Mavs found the formula to bother Kobe Bryant enough defensively, and the Lakers could no longer keep up with the efficiency of the Mavs offense. The Mavs would beat the Lakers in Game 7 to get back to the finals. In the finals, the Mavs would match up with the 2008 champion Boston Celtics. The Mavs would jump out to a convincing Game 1 win. The Celtics would match the Mavs' firepower and win Game 2. The Celtics couldn't repeat that offensive effort, and the Mavs would run away with Game 3, but the Mavs got the Celtics' best defensive effort, slowing the Mavs down to win both Games 4 and 5 to take a 3-2 series lead. With a few adjustments in the home crowd, the Mavs opened up an offensive assault to crush the Celtics in Game 6, and they rode that momentum to finish off the Celtics to win Game 7. The Dallas Mavericks had done it. They were champions once again. The Mavs celebrated another championship through the summer, and they now had the target on their backs. But Dallas had no reason to believe they couldn't do this again, especially once Steve Nash was re-signed to a 4-year deal. With the Nash-Nowitzki duo back and a few roster tweaks, the Mavs were ready to get every team's best night in and night out. Regardless, the Mavs started the season playing well as expected. Steve Nash and Dirk Nowitzki were playing as if they were in their absolute prime. They made the game look easy on most nights, and their chemistry was unmatched. Nash continued to run his team better than any other point guard in the league. Even with his scoring dipping down to 13 points per game, he was averaging an absurd 13 assists per game. The Mavs just had so many scoring options, and even though Caron Butler would go down for the season with a knee injury, the Mavs didn't experience any drop-off. The Mavs cruised to a 62-20 record, finishing first in the West once again, establishing themselves as the favorites to get back to the finals. The Mavs just completely ran through their opponents in the playoffs. Nash and Nowitzki were flat out unstoppable, and the Mavs were back in the finals as expected. However, they expected to face a much tougher challenge in the newly formed Miami Heat, featuring the big three of LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, and Chris Bosh. That proved to be the case, as the Heat would steal home court with a convincing win in Game 1. The Mavs would find a way to steal a close Game 2, but the Heat would bounce back to take Game 3. With Dirk Nowitzki sick with an illness for Game 4, Steve Nash would step up to help lead the Mavs keep pace throughout the game, setting up Dirk to hit clutch buckets down the stretch to tie the series at 2. And just as the Mavs did in the finals last year, they were able to adjust and find the spark to turn up their offense to an unstoppable level. The Mavs gave a complete team effort and crushed the Heat in Game 5. Then the Heat simply had no answer for Dirk Nowitzki in Game 6. The Mavs pulled off the ultimate upset, closing out the series to become back-to-back champions. It was safe to consider the Dallas Mavericks a dynasty. 3 championships in 5 seasons, which included one of the best seasons in league history, and a back-to-back. A three-peat would just be over the top. But the lockout delayed the Mavs' title defense, and Dallas turned over much of the supporting cast as a result. But as long as they had Nash and Nowitzki, considered to be the best duo of all time alongside Jordan and Pippen, Dallas felt they should remain championship favorites. Once the season finally started, the extra rest seemed to do the veteran duo some good, and the Mavs still played at a championship level. Nash was still great, averaging 13 points per game and 10 assists per game, and Dirk was still scoring at an elite level, and the two were showing no signs of slowing down. The Mavs finished the shortened season 45-19, good for second in the West. A three-peat was certainly looking realistic. The Mavericks continued playing great through the playoffs and advanced to the Western Conference Finals for a rematch with the Oklahoma City Thunder. But this time, it appeared there might be a changing of the guard. The Thunder, led by superstars Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook, had grown into the best team in the West, and they combined their previous experiences with their youth, talent, and athleticism to overwhelm the veteran Mavs. The Mavericks would split the first two games, but would be ran out the gym the rest of the way, ultimately losing the series 4-1. In the blink of an eye, the quest for a repeat wasn't just ended, it was crushed. Dallas saw a need to get younger talent around their stars in order to keep contending. Longtime Mav and six-man Jason Terry was not re-signed, and in his place Dallas signed former Memphis Grizzlies guard O.J. Mayo, who they felt had untapped star potential. Unfortunately, Dirk Nowitzki would undergo a knee procedure in October and would have to miss the first 2 months of the season. This meant for the first time in his career as a Mav, Steve Nash would have to play an extensive amount of time without Dirk on the floor with him. But only 2 games into the season, Nash would suffer a leg fracture that would sideline him for the next 2 months as well. With the Mavs looking far different than they have ever looked, O.J. Mayo did his best to keep the team afloat, but it was a struggle overall, and it didn't translate into many wins. But once Nash and Nowitzki were ready to return in December, the Mavs started to get back to their winning ways. But it was starting to become evident that the duo was starting to decline. Nash's average dipped down to 11 points per game and 8 assists per game, and Dirk was still trying to regain form after recovering from surgery. The Mavs were still a good team, but they no longer looked dominant. Then Nash suffered hip and hamstring injuries towards the end of the season that would force him out through the first round of the playoffs. The Mavs finished the season with a 48-34 record, 5th in the West, their lowest win percentage since the 99-2000 season. There wasn't much optimism going into their first round matchup against the up-and-coming Memphis Grizzlies. The Mavs gave a great effort, and even Steve Nash came back earlier than expected to provide a spark. But the Grizzlies were just too powerful, dominating the Mavs to win the series 4-2. Nash would try his best to get healthy over the summer, but now at 38 years old, it's possible that his best days may finally be behind him. Dallas was starting to prepare themselves for life after Nash and Nowitzki, but in the meantime, they were going to try to make one more run. As the season began, Nash was still struggling with nerve damage from his leg injury, and only after a few games, Nash was sidelined indefinitely. Dirk seemed to be fully recovered from his knee injury and was having a solid season, but without Nash, the Mavs were inconsistent. And even when Nash returned to the lineup in February, he was clearly a shell of himself, averaging a career-low 6 points per game and 5 assists per game, playing in just 15 games total. Nash was shut down for the rest of the season in March, but the Mavs still finished the season with a solid 49-33 record, good for 7th in the competitive West. The Mavs' first-round opponent were the heavily favored LA Clippers, but the Mavs would give a better effort than expected, pushing the Clippers to 6 games, but ultimately, as expected, the Mavs would not have enough to pull off the upset. Steve Nash, knowing he was physically incapable of playing, decided to retire, and even though Dirk Nowitzki would play a few more seasons, the Mavs would go into rebuilding mode. Steve Nash as a Mav, 3-time champion and all-time league leader in assists. The Dallas Mavericks were a franchise that rose from the bottom and enjoyed historic success with the duo of Steve Nash and Dirk Nowitzki, the greatest point guard big man duo of all time. Again, thank y'all for tuning in. Of course, don't forget to subscribe. Feel free to like and comment. And if y'all have any suggestions, feel free to let me know as well. We're going to keep it rolling with another episode next week of the Alternate Sports Planet. See y'all soon.